and welcome to the Guardian Ashes Weekly, supported by Qantas, the spirit of Australia. I'm Max Rushden. This is our preview of the first Ashes Test and the series, which starts in Perth on Friday. The grizzled old Australians have been hard at it in the Sheffield Shield in preparation. The English have had a game against themselves and a round of golf. Lots to get into. The impact of Pat Cummins and Josh Hazlewood's absence versus England's, at the moment, touchwood, 100% fit pace attack. Can Joe Root get a century? Can England win their first Test in Australia since January 2011? And if they can win a Test, what about a series? Can Bazball work on a bouncy Perth wicket? Will Mitchell Starc basically win the whole thing with the first ball like he did in 2021? Lots of questions and an excellent brackets, almost balanced panel. Welcome to the Guardian Ashes Weekly. On the panel today, then cricket correspondent Ali Martin. Hey, Ali.
Hello, Max. Good to hear from you and see you. All's well here in Perth. We've got about 9,000 England fans jetting in, apparently. So, looking forward to this one.
Guardian senior sports writer Andy Bull back in London. Hey, Andy.
Hello. I am back in London. I'm the odd one out. I'm stuck here where it's snowing right now, amazingly enough.
Is that right? Oh, yes. Good. That's exciting. And with me for the whole thing, unless, of course, we fall out over musical cricketing differences, Geoff Lemon. Hey, Geoff.
I'm looking forward to it. I'd like to see what's going to break the band up. Where do the tensions come in? You know, biopic style. Like, where is it by the second act, the end of the second act, that we're tearing each other's throats out? Let's make it happen.
I'm very non-confrontational, to be honest. Yeah, I'll just go with, whatever. I'm a people pleaser.
Yeah,
so you can walk all over me.
More than anything. That might be what gets me really steamed.
Well, I'm pleased to help you out in that situation. Let's start with this. I alluded to it in the intro. TS says, do the panel think we will at least get through the first ball of the series before losing all hope? I turned off the TV and went straight to bed when Rory Burns was bowled, first ball in 2021. Ali, give us hope. Can we make it to the second ball?
I think England will win the toss and bowl, so it's going to be all good on that front. But it's funny you mentioned that Rory Burns one. We spoke to him a couple of days before that Test match. Was out here covering that tour, and we asked him if he'd thought about the first ball, and he gave a very sort of firm no. And we all know how it played out.
Probably should have done.
Yeah, that was kind of how it felt at the time.
Yeah, I was in the Channel 9 offices with a lot of Australians going, I think we've got a chance this year. Maybe not this time. Look, I mean, beyond that, Geoff, because hopefully it will go beyond the first delivery. It'll still be even then. How are you feeling going into it?
I mean, I would have said you should turn the TV off just because Rory Burns was going out there to bat. Nobody needed to see that. So things are a bit different this time around. I think, as Ali said, England do like to bowl first and Australia like to bat first, so the toss might be relatively ceremonial at that stage. But I'm excited. I'm excited that Australia are depleted, as silly as that might sound, because I want to see England have to go for it. I want to see them have to pick the side that's all pace, throw everything at Australia, get a bit ridiculous, go over the top. In terms of, like, make everything happen, be excessive. This is what we want to see from this England side, because they've talked it up for a few years. So, okay, well, let's see it actually happen on grass.
I can just see that, Andy, talking about the toss, and you can just see, England bowling, and then, Australia getting a decent first innings, and all the inverted commas dinosaurs saying, you've got to bat first. Why have they done this? As we've heard so many times during this Bazball era.
Yeah, I was slightly alarmed that both Geoff and Ali have already decided what's going to happen at the toss just because of the record at the toss at this ground, which I'm sure they can both tell you all about, which is that everyone wins the toss, everyone bats first, and everyone who does that wins the Test. And that's happened for all 5 matches here. So, that's a little bit alarming already.
But you think, Ali, that's what England will do?
Well, I mean, I don't know. There's a couple of there's a bit of time for the pitch to bake. We're not even entirely sure at this stage of England's 11, but Stokes, yep, he's a big fan of. He doesn't really say we'll have a bowl first. He likes to say we'll chase, and that kind of is indicative of the kind of mentality of this England team.
Yeah, and it has worked for them, Geoff. And you wonder if there is a time where they go, actually, as Andy said, the record, the stats in Perth, they're so obvious that you bat first that maybe this is the time. I don't know.
Maybe, but a lot of it depends on what kind of surface you get dished up. at Perth. So we've only had the 5 tests here. We moved away from the WACA. It was the 2017-18 Ashes was the last WACA test, if I'm remembering rightly, with England playing there when we had an unusual squall of rain, and then there was that wet spot on the pitch, and Josh Hazlewood was hitting the wet spot and getting the ball to burrow under Bairstow's bat, and all the rest of it going on over at the WACA. Over here, it's been erratic. I remember watching, these Perth tests over the years. The first one when India played, that pitch was quite vicious. It was cracking up. There was very erratic bounce. Mohammad Shami was very dangerous on that surface. Australia managed to win the game in the end. Virat Kohli made a great 100. But then you had a West Indies test when the pitch was pretty sleepy, and West Indies were very much outmatched, but they managed to take it into the 5th day. Their opening pair, Brathwaite and Chanderpaul, were batting long in that test and able to take a fair bit of time out of the game. And then you've got a pitch like the one last year against India where wickets absolutely tumbled the first day and a half. Australia and India were both bowled out cheaply. And then India went big after that. It was deeper into the game. Kohli again made 100. And so it set things up so that Australia were so far behind the game. So if that's the kind of route that England want to take, where they're looking at chasing a big target in the 4th innings on a relatively flat track, if they get a pitch like they had last year, well, that might well be the case, and they might find themselves chasing by late day 3 even, rather than day 4 when the pitch hasn't started to break up at the other end of the 5 days.
England have named the 12, right, Annie? They've included Shoaib Bashir in that. Do you think he'll be in the 11? Or is that all totally depend on what this pitch looks like?
I struggle to believe that they haven't made their minds up yet. I wonder if they're simply keeping their options open for the sake of not showing all the cards that they have in their hand. The interesting thing about playing a spinner in this game is that Nathan Lyon, who I know is in no way equivalent to Shoaib Bashir in terms of his accomplishments, but he's got an amazing record at this ground. And that game, he was man of the match in that first India test that Geoff was just talking about. So I don't know. I'd feel a little trepidatious about going in without any spinner in the side at all, simply because of that. I think Lyon's got coming up for 30 wickets at 20 at this ground. But then you do want to see that all-out pace barrage too. If England are going to win, it's not going to be by Shoaib Bashir bowling Australia out, is it? It's probably going to be by Mark Wood and Jofra Archer doing most of the wicket-taking. So yeah, I suspect they will pick an all-out pace attack. Is my feeling on that.
Ali?
I was at Nets yesterday, which is England's first net session at the Optus, and as well as sort of batting away the flies and getting a bit of sunburn on the top of my feet, watched Mark Wood steaming in, and his left leg is heavily strapped. The scan that he had on that hamstring injury, there was no hamstring injury, essentially. The scan, as we were kind of briefed, as we kind of managed to collar a coach as they went past, was essentially just to reassure him. It's been such a long time out of Test cricket for him and he's a upbeat, bubbly kind of guy, but he is also can be a bit nervous, understandably, given the sort of his record in terms of injuries over the years. So it was more a kind of reassurance, but nevertheless, I think that they will be wanting to use Mark Wood in as short kind of short bursts as possible, and possibly, maybe 12 overs a day, ideally for, three sort of 4 over bursts, and also with those sort of slight concerns about potential fragility is that there's cover for him if the worst does happen. There would still be 4 seamers there, of which, Stokes is arguably England's best seamer. He certainly was England's best seamer in the summer, but operating as the fifth as the fifth seamer in this particular attack. So I can see them going that way, but it does make me a little bit nervous anytime a team goes into a Test match without a spinner, because Perth is very hot at the moment. It was a little bit overcast and rainy yesterday. We had a little bit of rain today, but generally when the sun's been out, it's been very hot, and the pitch has been exposed. And I just wonder, if I was Australia, I would be hoping that there is a bit of turn in that pitch, because it is one area where they have an absolute clear advantage over England, as you say, with that Lyon-Bashir matchup. So, that's my reading of it, that all pace is probably the likely bet. But it is interesting that Bashir's in the 12. It might just be to keep him interested, because they are going to need him this series. Want to make him feel like he's part of that first team shake-up, even if he misses out here for tactical reasons.
Yeah, I reckon it's that. I reckon it's that, Ali. I think it's management. I think it's player management. It seems very unlikely that they'd pick him. I mean, it's well and good to say that every team should have a spinner, and generally I agree with that. You want to have that option. But if we're going to be speaking bluntly, Shoaib Bashir is just not that good. His record's not that good. He's like, the fact that he's been fast tracked into this side is strange. The fact that he's been preferred for so long is strange. Yes, he's tall and he might get bounced, but that doesn't mean that he's going to be able to stand up, and it doesn't mean he'll be able to do the kind of things that Nathan Lyon's been able to do to visiting teams. Bashir's playing away from home. You've got Mark Wood there. You've got the possibility of playing him and Archer. You've got the high risk that either of those two end up injured so easily, because they have done so many times in the past. It seems to me like if you've got them available, if you've got the chance of picking them both in a test match, why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you take that option when you've got it? And like you say, Mark Wood might be thinking he bowls 20 overs for the test. It might be 3 spells in the first innings and 2 in the second, if he gets it right, if he can do the sort of thing he did at Headingley a couple of years ago and come in and really influence the game. And as you say, if he does fall over, then they've got the rest of the seamers there to back it up. I can't see what you get as an advantage. Like, if you're picking your best bowler, who's a better bowler? Who's Australia going to want to face more, Shoaib Bashir or Mark Wood? Pretty easy to answer that one.
I bet there's a danger, I guess, if Mark Wood's only doing 20 overs. I mean, how many is Jofra Archer going to do? Like, someone's got to do a lot of overs here.
But those two are basically one bowler. You treat those two, you picked those two to do the allotment of one fast bowler, and then the other quicks will do the rest, would be my read on it.
Right, and the advantage is that you have Stokes, who I guess, Andy, I don't know, like a year or two ago, you sort of wrote, like, his bowling was you wrote that off. That wasn't going to happen anymore. And this summer, you actually did see, it was sort of extraordinary how good he was.
Yeah, he, like Ali said, he was England's best bowler this summer by actually quite a comfortable distance. Yeah, I don't know if you ever write Stokes off. I think, he's almost the last cricketer I would ever do that to be honest.
No, sure.
Because he's got such a remarkable ability to prove people wrong and to sort of defy the limits, or what ought to be the limits, of his own body. But yeah, it was actually one of the strongest aspects of all England's cricket this summer, was his ability to bowl fast. He was bowling faster than we'd seen in a long time. He was also moving the ball a lot too. Again, though, how much bowling do you actually want Ben Stokes to be doing over the course of this series? That's another real live question.
And we haven't mentioned then Atkinson and Cast, Ali, who will have to do a lot of grunt work. Is that impolite to them?
No, you could probably say it to their face. They're pretty sound blokes. But Cast is the one there. He will be the guy who will bowl the donkey overs. But also, I say the donkey overs, he's not bowling donkey overs at sort of low 80s. He will be hovering around mid-80s, trying to push up to the high 80s. And a particularly good bowler. Particularly good bowler with a kookaburra ball. He's not... It's strange. He's one of those kind of players who he's sort of better suited to overseas cricket. And last winter, we saw him take 27 wickets off the top of my head, which is more in an overseas winter than Stuart Broad or James Anderson ever managed in their sort of decorated careers. So he is a kookaburra ball bowler. He is potentially an away bowler, and he's a particularly handy batsman as well. And he's got a big heart, and he's up for the kind of scrap as well. So it probably is a case of Cast or Bashir possibly for that sort of final spot, if you look at it that way. I think Mark Wood is playing. I think you have to, at the start of this series, given the two players out for Australia, you have to push all your chips into the middle in terms of your biggest wicket taking bowlers. So I think Wood is in. And it's just whether they want the kind of the relief work to be done by Cast, pounding away as he does, or Bashir possibly being pounded away himself. I don't know.
Well, let's talk about the missing Australians then, or we might as well do their bowling attack now. We've done England's. Like, how big a blow is it, Geoff, to have no Cummins and no Hazelwood?
It's enormous. I think it's logarithmic. You're missing one of those big three. Australia can cover for that. You're missing two of them. The effect is multiplied rather than added, and particularly that it's the two right armers. They're the control mechanism that allows Stark to be attacking in the way that he is, to pitch up, to look for swing, to bounce players. You've got the way that Hazelwood's bowled in the white ball stuff over the last few months has been extraordinary. He's, I think, out of that three at the moment, he's Australia's best bowler. He's looked the most dangerous. He was getting players out in one day and T20 cricket as though he were bowling in a test match. Hard length splice, shoulder of the bat, making them flinch at pace, that kind of thing. And he sort of sets the agenda, I suppose. And the fact that they're able to then have Cummins come in and bowl the 7th or 8th over of an innings and bowl first change and be that sort of partnership breaker bowler behind the other two, I mean, that 3 works so well. Take Cummins out of that equation and put Boland in, you're not losing a huge amount because Boland has been so effective in that first change position. He's the one who's bowled 7th or 8th over, and he's often got on a run when he's come on to bowl those spells. He's got a real knack of taking multiple wickets in an over or wickets really early in a spell. We saw him take a hat-trick in Jamaica only a few months ago. So Boland as the 3rd bowler has been terrific, but he's now got to be the 2nd bowler, which means he's probably taking the new ball. I'm not sure how they'll, could be dogged to take the new ball, but you would think it would be Boland on seniority. So that's nothing new for him in terms of state cricket for Victoria, but it is a change of role in the test side. And then you've got Brendan Doggett, who's new, and they're talking up how experienced he is, and he's 31 and he's played lots of first-class cricket and he's a laid-back character and all the rest of it. But how much of that is he actually going to be able to maintain, to keep with him and carry onto the field if you've got that Perth stadium full? It's never been full for a day of Test cricket before, but apparently it's sold out, so we'll see if everybody shows up. But that should be, 55, 60,000 people, something like that, for the first day of Test cricket, the first day of an Ashes. That's his Test debut as well. I don't care how laid back you are, it's still going to be tough to try to, keep things together at that stage. So it's a huge ask for this rejigged Australian attack, no matter how confident they've tried to sound in the press conferences. Missing Hazelwood and Cummins is way, way different to missing one of them.
Right, and so, Geoff, does that mean, do you have England as favourites for this test for that reason?
I don't know if they're favourites, but only because England have, in my lifetime, been so expert at losing to Australian teams they shouldn't lose to. And I'm not even sort of saying that to be clever or quirky. It's bizarre to me, some of the players who've excelled against England in Australia over the years. Brad Haddon had the best series ever by a batter outside the top 6 in a series against England in 2013-14. Sean Marsh was the defining player in 2017-18 in the first 2 Test matches. Mitchell Marsh has played defining innings when, he's a much better player now than he was back then when he was playing defining innings against England. Mediocre players in terms of their performance at the time have excelled against England when they've played them in Australia. So I don't necessarily have confidence that England will get it together historically, but this is the test they should win. They should absolutely be considering themselves favourites, and if they don't win this test, then they've dropped what is an absolutely golden opportunity.
It feels like a just real English generosity to say, who are you? You're pretty mid-range.
Yep.
You want to be a star.
How would you
come
like
and
to have
play
the
us?
best day of your career against us? We are willing to give that to you. There's been a real magnanimous streak to some of these England touring teams. And again, I'm not saying it to be a smartass. I'm saying it because I'm kind of frustrated by it, because I've seen England dominate in one series in Australia in living memory, and I've seen Australia dominate every other series. I haven't seen a competitive series in Australia that's an Ashes, and I would really like to. It would be fun.
And so, Andy, do you see it like in a broader sense before we get into the batting lineups? Do you agree with Geoff that this is a massive, like a golden opportunity for England? Or, Andy, do you see it that this series should be like a close one? We should be getting to Sydney 2-2 or something like that.
I think it's absolutely the opportunity. No one's going to look at it and think anything else. And I think Geoff's exactly right in all regards there when he talks about our history of being done by middle-ranking Australian players, getting Andy Bickled, you might call it.
Yep.
But I do think it's really different having it in the first test of the series. I think for a guy from that middle rank, like Doggett, to come in to play the first Ashes test, I think that's very different to coming into a team midway through a series when they're already leading, which is kind of what we've seen happen with some of these guys in the past. And I also think that this English team is a very different proposition, and they will be looking to put those players under a hell of a lot of pressure. And you will see that from batsmen like Harry Brook, who will think nothing of A, trying to take down Scott Boland, and B, trying to take down Doggett. That doesn't mean they'll necessarily do it. It may not come off. But there is then a live question about how you handle yourself on that stage with that crowd when a batsman like Harry Brook is playing the sort of stupid shots for six that he's going to try and play to you? The historical thing, I think, is a really interesting question for this team, because we almost forget, I think, that this whole, and I want to call it a revolution, although the word's a bit over the top, but this whole reinvention of English cricket, that comes about in direct response to years of failure that Geoff's talking about. And even if it's not the immediate trigger, those 12 years of failure, a lot of the culture we see that went into those teams, a lot of the things you associate with English Ashes tours, and that's kind of sad general managers and depressed cricketers and batsmen with quirky techniques standing on one leg and random players coming in for debuts in the fifth test. Like, there's a whole, all blurs into one of just like real mediocrity. But, this is definitely not that England team. They have their own flaws. There are plenty of them. They're absurd, they're preposterous, they do stupid things. All of that is true, but they are not going to fail in the same way those England teams failed. I can promise you that, if they do fail at all.
Andy's right. They are a team that is sort of unencumbered by history. And a lot of the sort of reflex fears that we have following English cricket are not ones that are kind of felt by this team itself in particular. And you've only got to sort of look at the sort of semi-recent history of English cricket, that quite often it takes an outsider or new world thinking to sort of, to come into the mother country and kind of shake out that cynicism and that kind of sense of fatalism that can take hold of English cricket. I'm thinking Duncan Fletcher, Andy Flower, Kevin Peterson, Owen Morgan, Trevor Bayliss, and in the current instance, so that's Brendan McCullum, who has managed to get these guys sort of cleansed of that kind of sort of traditional old world English mindset and get them thinking, as Andy said, in a way that is new and different. As he says, it can be absurd and preposterous. It can also be spectacular. And what it tends to do, regardless of results, is throw up some absolutely classic test matches. I can't think of a period in my career, or even following England as I did as a backpacker, back in the day, around the world a little bit, of a side that has that kind of capability of just producing games, win or lose, of some absolute nail biters. I'm thinking 1 run in Wellington, 6 runs at the Oval just gone in the summer. Obviously the Edgbaston win back in 23 when Pat Cummins and Nathan Lyon, managed to pull off that run chase at the end. It's a team that produces great test matches, and just about more than half of them they're ahead of in. So yeah, it's going to be cool.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, aren't you? You can't. I feel like you can no longer just get on Twitter after a brilliant test match and go, "Who said test match cricket is dead now?" Because but actually the last 5 tests have all been really good. So I think it might be all right. But I like the idea that the way to make England less English is to make sure there's just enough people that aren't English in or near the side. That means that we lose all the inhibitions that we actually have. Anyway, that'll do for part 1. We'll be back in a second. Hello, Max Rushden here.
And I'm Geoff Lemon.
The Guardian Ashes Weekly is supported by Qantas, the spirit of Australia, and that's not an empty claim. You don't have to wait until you get there. Qantas aims to showcase what's great about the country the moment you step on board. Which brings up a question, Geoff. What do you reckon is the best thing about Australia, putting cricket to one side?
I think that you have to say the food. We've got great producers, fresh ingredients. It's part of the Australian way of life in the modern world, and Australian chefs, Australian producers have had an influence on food around the world.
And you can definitely expect great food from down under on a Qantas flight, featuring menus specially designed for healthier long-haul travelling. What else, Geoff?
I'm going to nominate, controversially, Australian hospitality, which might not always be completely present at the ground if you're an England player. But I think once you get outside the cricket ground, people are, in the main, very welcoming, happy to have visitors and happy to chat to you about where you're from, what you're doing and where you should be going.
And there's lots of that on a Qantas flight to Australia. Nobody knows Australia like Qantas. Book now at Qantas.com. You're listening to the Guardian Ashes Weekly. I'm Max Rushden, with me, Ali Martin, Andy Bull and Geoff Lemon. Let's talk about the batting lineups then. Geoff, what do you make of England's top order?
Well, they've got the possibility to spring something, and this is what is exciting. This sort of goes back to what Ali and Andy were talking about in the first part, that in terms of losing the same way, if you were going back in time, if you were picking some of the previous squads to face up against Scott Boland and Brendan Doggett, if you had Mark Stoneman out there and James Vince playing those sort of next rank Australian players, they'd probably be respectful, they'd probably be cautious, they'd probably be courteous, they'd be trying to do the right thing, they'd be thinking, oh, well, I really don't want to get out to this guy on debut and look silly, so let's make sure that we just play him out and just get your head down and just play through the spell. Whereas I think Zach Crawley and Ben Duckett will think, well, let's smash this joker. Let's take down his first spell so that he's nervous for his second spell, and then let's crush his second spell so that they can't bring him back for a third spell. Let's get Australia on the back foot, and that is a different attitude. And like we've said, it might not come off. Easy to nick one, easy to smack one to short mid wicket, and so on. But the intention will be there to take those bowlers down, and that's the way that these guys have played for so long. Zach Crawley's had the longest rope since the 1800s shipping industry, but he's got that confidence. He's not going to get dropped if he has a couple of bad tests here. He's going to play the series. He's going to play 5 tests. It really doesn't matter what happens. So he's able to go out there and attack it. Duckett has been able to make that work for himself. He's been able to turn himself into one of England's most reliable with the bat in doing so. Joe Root, the question, the subject matter will keep on being chewed over and over about him making 100 until he makes 100. But if he's ever going to make 100, it's going to be this tour because of the form he's been in the last couple of years. And then, Harry Brook had a miserable trip out here at that T20 World Cup and couldn't make a run, but that's a very different thing. The fact that he's got the audacity that he has, the way that he's been able to play, the hundreds that he's racked up in such a short space of time, he's the player probably even more than Root, who's the one who could make or break the series. Harry Brook has the defining series of his life here. England probably win it. Stokes with the bat, I think, is a fading force, and we haven't seen much from him for a pretty long while, but those 4 characters above that, Pope at 3, or whether he gets replaced by Bethel later in the series, that might be a different thing. But it's that opening combo, and then it's the Root and Brook combo in the middle order that decides just about everything. And then I suppose Jamie Smith has the opportunity, particularly if he does get a couple of flatter pitches, to try to do a pseudo Gilchrist for the modern era, and these could be the kind of conditions where he's able to punish bowling as well.
Andy, do you want to chew over Joe Root and the century and the lost century in Australia?
Yeah, it's an odd one, isn't it? Because his record in Australia is not terrible. It's just not stellar either.
Average is 30 odd.
Sort of
he's way under where he should be for a player of his caliber.
Absolutely. But nor would you say that he's been a kind of abject failure. He's just been bubbling along.
Fine. He's been fine.
He's been fine, yeah.
And he's played in a bunch of teams that have got annihilated, so it's generally pretty hard to make runs when you're being annihilated in the first couple of innings of a match.
And, I remember this actually before our last Ashes tour out there. He was talking then about how much thinking he was doing about managing angles and the back foot shots he loves to play with a straight bat, and whether that game is going to work for him in Australia. I'm not always convinced that he has the same clarity of mind about how he wants to score his runs in Australia that he seems to have when he plays around the rest of the world. I almost wonder if he's a little unsure himself, if he has the game to dominate in Australia. I really hope that he does bring it to this series, not just because I'm English and I want to see them do well, but because he's one of the greatest batsmen, maybe even the greatest batsman England have ever had. And it annoys me that he has this blemish on his record. It annoys me that a lot of Australians don't rate him perhaps as highly as he deserves to be rated, simply because of that omission. So I do hope he goes there and gets it done.
I would say that the last Ashes series, the 21-22, Joe Root and Joss Buttler were in stiff competition for being the 2 most miserable men I've ever seen around a cricket team. They were so unhappy. Root was so unhappy as a captain. It looked like he didn't want to be there and he didn't want to be doing it. And he's a much happier cricketer now playing in this team under Stokes. So with any luck, that's the thing that opens him up, that lets him go out and express himself to the fullest rather than being constrained.
I was at the MCG. I'm such an optimistic cricket fan that I just sort of, then they say just add on 2 wickets. I'm always adding on like 300 runs. I think Joss Butler came out at the MCG when Scott Boland was getting like a wicket every delivery. And I was thinking, Joss Butler can hit it. This will be fine. And it certainly wasn't. We were in the standard, pub at opening time. It was like, okay, Joss Butler hasn't, and he trudged on. Like, it's okay to trudge off, but he sort of trudged on, didn't he? And you think that's not a great sign.
Yeah.
Ali, of the English batsmen, I mean, I said maybe a daft question to pick one, but like they do go in with a more settled, that it feels settled, that you feel like who's where, who's coming in when, and that is just a nice position to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. The only real sort of wobble they have had in recent times is just that number 3 spot, and Ollie Pope. Ollie Pope, I think I'm right in saying he's got 9 Test centuries against 9 different countries, which is that's a really cool stat in one regard, but it also shows that he kind of does it once per series, and a lot of series he gets his 100 and ends up averaging sort of 33. So that was the one spot that they had a bit of a wobble about. He was the one who got the most out of that warm-up game. He got 190 there, and having just been sort of had the vice captaincy taken off him and handed to Harry Brook, white ball captain, and with a bit of a bit of leadership alignment in the sort of bigger picture. That could have been a bit of a hammer blow, but perhaps even it sort of freed him up even more. I'm sure he'll still be chipping into leadership meetings and the conversations they're having, but it's now just down to his runs, a bit of work at short leg where he's very good, and then fingers crossed from an English point of view, he doesn't have to put the wicket keeping gloves on, albeit he's a very competent wicketkeeper as well. So it's a settled top 7. Jamie Smith is an interesting one. I think Australians who haven't seen him bat before will hopefully like what they see. He is massive. It's like RoboCop walking out there. He's huge, particularly for a wicketkeeper. I mean, he's huge. You just sort of look at him and think, that's
it's not right, is it? It isn't right. A wicketkeeper should be, really 5'1". That's what we really want, isn't it?
He's small and chippy, but he's a bit of a kind of sports car there, the way he plays. The one thing just going back to the summer, Edgbaston, the guy walks out on a hat trick, hits the hat trick ball for 4 and makes an 80 ball 100 before lunch. He is a serious talent, but there was the one that got away from him on that final morning at the Oval, where it was probably the only time in his, albeit very short England career, that I felt that he looked a little bit twitchy. He was, the old ball was swinging a lot, but he kept flirting outside off stump and eventually went, and that was almost the game there and then. So, but I think people will like what they're going to see, and he's a particularly sort of, I say RoboCop, he's almost quite a sort of robotic guy, very methodical, process driven, not hugely emotional, and that suggests to me that bar that one little blip at the Oval, that he's got it between the ears to be able to sort of cope in what's going to be a pretty sort of white hot atmosphere.
I mean, as a Ben Folkes lover, it was hard for me to see someone who's so good with the gloves have them taken away. It was like, that's not fair. Like, can't Folkes keep and then Smith can go and bat for him? Even though I thought Folkes was like a brilliant, like one non-Bazbally batsman in the whole time. I also quite liked it when he came in. You could all just go, now I can just go and get a cup of tea because someone's going to take a bit of time. We haven't talked about the Australian batting lineup, Geoff, which we should do because that's also important.
Yeah, well, the Australian batting lineup it's been an interesting question over the last few weeks because it's the Chinese tile puzzle. You move one piece and then you have to move the other ones, and so much of it has depended on whether Cameron Green will be fit to bowl, and if he's fit to bowl, then he probably bats at 6, and if he's not fit to bowl, he probably bats at 3, and Labuschagne opens. But broadly, it seemed pretty settled for a while that as long as Green's fit, they'll go with Weatherald in the opening spot with Khawaja. They'll go Labuschagne 3, Smith 4, Head at 5. Those two are immovable, really. And then Green at 6 with Carey at 7, the keeper. So pretty conventional in that sense. They'll have the new opener, so you've got one of your fast bowling attack plus your opening bat on debut, the way that things are likely to play out there. But there's a lot riding on that opening partnership because Usman Khawaja versus Pace has been very unconvincing for a couple of years now. His record, pace versus spin, has been vastly different, and particularly when the pace has been high pace and high quality. Of course, that's difficult. Of course, any player is going to have their struggles against that, but he hasn't looked to have an answer when he's been facing proper quality quicks of the type of Bumrah, Siraj, Rabada. Matt Henry's had his number. And he's been getting out the same way. He's been hopping. He's sort of off the ground on his toes. He's fending at the ball outside off stump, and then he's missing the one that's coming back into him as well. So if they've got two genuinely express options in Wood and Archer who can target Khawaja, well, I guess I don't think he's getting 10 innings in this series if he doesn't make runs in the first 2 to 4. Put it that way. I think he'll get a couple of tests, but if he hasn't performed after the second test, then things might be moving. So there's a fair bit of room for England to put pressure on because there are more points of flex in Australia's order. If England have a couple of low-scoring games, they're probably not making many changes with the exception of perhaps that number 3 spot. If Australia have a couple of bad games, there could be all sorts of changes.
Sure. And actually, Andy, it's so hard to quantify what that pressure means for each individual batsman, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I actually think the Australian batsman that concerns me most right now is the fact that Marnus Labuschagne, having really lost his way and obviously dropped out of the team for a time, seems to have rediscovered such fine form. I do think that will be a concern for England. Without Labuschagne in that kind of world-leading form, their batting was really looking quite thin. It looked quite thin in the World Test Championship final at points. And to have him back in that sort of real bulwark form where he can just bat and bat and bat, he's one of those batsmen who could bat for almost the entire series if you left him to it. So that's one real clear area of improvement since the last time I saw this Australian team in Test cricket, which was in that World Test Championship final. The fact they've got another really strong world-leading batsman possibly back in that sort of form.
And Ali, Labuschagne and Smith have that ability to just look impossible to get out. Sometimes they just have series. And the only other batsman I can think of, do you remember Chanderpaul in one series? It was just impossible. He was just getting about 1 billion runs. He was just standing. Whenever I turned the TV on, he was just there. And that, Smith has had that over England before. Like, getting his wicket feels so huge. But if Labuschagne and Smith both have that form, that could make it be a massive difference. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's kind of where it comes back to England's airspeed, essentially. That's where they'll be looking, particularly with Smith. They'll be hoping that, 36, and he's not the player he was, albeit he's still clearly a quality player. And I have got a feeling that this is going to be the receipts Ashes, where things people have said in the lead up will be clipped up and sent viral many times because they're made to look stupid. But so probably it's quite dangerous to say that I don't think Smith is the player he was, because he does have that kind of sort of ability, that sort of Neo-like ability, just to absolutely see the matrix and become sort of unremovable. In terms of Labuschagne, I guess England would be less concerned about him less concerned about his peak than they would be Smith's peak. And I think it's fair to say with Labuschagne that he did very well to miss that Caribbean tour where the highest score was sort of in the mid-70s. What was that? It was about 74, wasn't it? And it was no one was getting any runs, and that could have actually been terminal. That could have been terminal for him if that. And they did right by him. They whipped him out, and they've got him back into domestic cricket. Obviously, he enjoys his time at Glamorgan, but particularly his start to the Australian domestic summer has been impressive. I guess my question to those who see more Sheffield Shield cricket than I do would be as to whether there is the pace in Sheffield Shield at the moment, because some of the quicker guys I notice, people like Lance Morris and what have you, have been out with long-term injuries. Jai Richardson is on the comeback trail. Riley Meredith doesn't necessarily string it together as much in 4-day cricket. So again, I just think its airspeed will be where England will be looking to challenge Labuschagne, and possibly, if they want to borrow a little tip from Stuart Broad, the outswinger.
Invent a new one.
There's always room for a new delivery. But what you're saying, Ellie, about Smith is true as well, that look at his last couple of Ashes series. I think they were mid-30s averages, modest returns. So there's an English tendency to remember, 2017-18 he made 600 plus runs and was just monstrous. And then 2019 he made 774 runs in the series. In 7 hits, it was the most Bradman-like series since Bradman. But he's had a couple of Ashes since then where he's been much less influential. He got his mojo back last Australian summer against India, where he racked up a few hundreds, then went to Sri Lanka and carried on in the same vein. And suddenly he'd added 500s to his tally in no time at all. But he's still not the player that he was at his peak. So there's a vulnerability, I think, to this Australian lineup where the opening pair is uncertain. Labuschagne's on the comeback, but like you say, facing someone at bowling 148 instead of 138 is a very different proposition. And then Travis Head has been a bit patchy in the white ball cricket he's played the last few months and just hasn't seemed completely settled, and he's a bit hit and miss anyway. So if he's miss rather than hit, suddenly there's a lot of pressure on Smith. If he's not able to deliver at the same standard he was, you've got Green there trying to bail everyone out with Carey at 6 and 7, and that's a team that's very much on the defensive. So the opportunity's there for England, certainly.
There's a really interesting question here, it's just got me thinking about it. England, like we've been saying, set teams particular challenges, this England team, that what they're doing is presenting a different set of problems to what a lot of test teams are used to. And that invites the question of what your strategy is going to be to cope with it. And one thing I think I've always been surprised teams don't try and do more, but India did do this summer, was to say, if you're speeding the game up, if you're going to score at 6 and over, you're creating time in the game, okay? We're going to take that time and we are just going to bat and bat and bat and bat until we are so far in front of you that you have no chance of winning it. And that's a thing I think Australian teams would have done in the past. They would have taken that time and said, that's fine, you give us all those days and we will bat for all of them and we will score at 3 and over. Not a problem.
Khawaja did that a bit in 2023.
Right. And so it's interesting then to see whether Smith and Labuschagne are going to be in the kind of form to take that kind of time and use it in that kind of way.
Geoff, a few times, on this pod, we've mentioned an Australian player and gone, he's 33, he's 36, he's 71. Does it matter that they're all old?
It doesn't matter right now. It doesn't matter for this series. The reason it keeps getting brought up is more about succession planning, and it's about the possibility of losing your entire bowling attack in the space of 6 months or something and having to start fresh and then having a couple of bad years where you get belted by everybody. So it's more about future-proofing than it is about the now, because I don't think anybody could argue that any of Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood or Lyon shouldn't be picked on the basis of recent returns. I think the 3 fast bowlers, Hazelwood and Stark, have been better in the last 2 or 3 years than they were in any of the years before that. Stark's got better as a bowler, better and better as he's gone along, more reliable, far less injury prone. Hazelwood's become more injury prone, but he's probably a higher quality operator when he's playing. And Cummins has missed almost no cricket with injury. He's missed a couple of tests for other reasons since he came back in 2017. But he's been remarkable with that resilience as well. Hazelwood's 295 test wickets, Cummins is 309, Stark's 402. So you've got 3 bowlers who are almost, just about past 300 wickets, all of them, and then Lyon with his 500 plus. There's nobody who's being picked who shouldn't be playing, and there's nobody in the country who would say you shouldn't pick Steve Smith because he's 36. The other players, you've got some 31, 32 sort of year-old players, but it doesn't mean as much anymore either. Sports conditioning's so much better, professional contracts, the training that they're able to do. Who cares if Bo Webster's 31 or turning 32 or if Jake Weatherall's 31? It doesn't matter. They're players who are still at their peak as far as being cricketers. And then your older players are the bowlers and Khawaja. And I think Khawaja's the only one where you could make an argument that they should have moved on from him a while ago, maybe a year ago, maybe after that Sydney test last year might have been the time, or before that Sydney test, to say, well, this is going to be it for you, so do your farewell lap at home and enjoy. But that's the only case, I think, where you could make an argument that a player could have been left out. For anyone else, look, the age doesn't matter if you're taking the wickets and making the runs. And I think that's a thing that people say to deflect criticism, but it's also a thing that's true in every case, except for Khawaja, where he hasn't scored a lot of runs in the last 2.5 years.
I just had one point to make, and everything that Geoff says is perfectly correct and fair analysis, particularly the point about the modern player and how well conditioned they are and how guys can push deeper in. The one counterpoint to that would just be that with a lot of international careers, cricketers don't necessarily see the end coming, and the end can suddenly come very quickly. So when you do push a team deep into its 30s, in some areas, it can just stop. And he's a terrific, quality cricketer, and he's also my hair twin. But Nathan Lyon, for example, is a player who at 37, is someone who, against an attacking England side, who will be looking to take him down, to take him out of the attack. I remember watching him in the World Test Championship final, and albeit, yes, it was a very flat pitch, but he had 280 on the board to defend and went wicketless. And he had a very quiet summer last year as well. So, it's a low stress role being the off spinner in that side. And it's not to say that he is going to fall off a cliff, but I'm just saying that it can come quicker than some players are expecting.
That's the clip we send to Nathan Lyon for his receipts, isn't it?
I think that's right. I mean, it's the same with, Hazelwood. This hamstring injury might turn into something else, and he might never play for Australia again. You don't know with these things, with the physical side of it, and then with the form side. Yeah, if Lyon gets belted in, say, 3 tests running, suddenly there'd be a lot of pressure on him, and there'd be talk about who should be replacing him. People turn on teams very quickly, particularly when the player is older. So you've got much less runway as an older player. It is something across Lyon's career that there have been a number of tests where he struggled to bowl out teams in the 4th innings, and I guess that 4th innings was relatively early in the test. It's not like it was the end of day 5 because it was a pretty fast-moving game. But it's a valid criticism of Lyon that he hasn't bowled teams out a bunch of times, and it's felt like it was a relief for him when he has bowled teams out. It's like he's sort of battling against the odds when he's done what by rights should be a spinner's job, to bowl out a team late in the game. But those 4th innings, the same as Headingley 2019, that's not the end of day 5 because the game's so fast that it's actually happening pretty early on day 4. But yeah, I think Ali's right that those things can move very quickly towards the end of an older player's career.
Andy, and I'll ask all the panel, final thoughts, and if you want to predict the series result, you are very welcome to, but don't feel under any pressure. As we established it, I'm a people pleaser. I don't want to put people in difficult positions. But Andy,
yeah, England are going to win it.
Lovely. That's
the
it.
Test,
Done.
the series. I feel embarrassed admitting this in public when I'm a professional journalist. People talk about the cult of the English team. When you have Barney Ronay, our colleague, I'm sure he will be happy to expand on his theory of the cult of English cricket. I drank the Kool-Aid a while ago. I have seen this England team and Ben Stokes in particular do so many astonishing things over the years that I think when Stokes has really put his mind to something, and he has put his mind to nothing but winning this series, he normally does it. And so I think it would be a bit of cowardly of me to get all the way up to the cusp of the series and say, well, actually, no, I don't think he is going to do it. So I choose to believe in Ben, and I'm going to put that on a T-shirt.
No, I'm with you. Ali, join the movement.
The thing is, I'm already on record. We had to, maybe it hasn't been published at the point of talking, but it's coming out very soon, which we were all asked for our writer predictions, and it was a bit of an arse on the fence kind of thing, but I did go for the 2-2 with rain in Sydney. It's such a huge ask for England to win the 3 test matches in Australia. It's not beyond them, certainly, but it's a huge ask. I've just been looking at the numbers today. There's been 27 5-test series this century, and the away side has only won 3 times. That is Steve Waugh's Australians in 2001, which is the last time that Australia won in England. It's England in South Africa 04-05, and then it's the Strauss team, the most recent 10-11. So just winning a 5-test series away from home is one hell of a task. But as Andy says, these guys make you think they can do it. They convince themselves they can do it, and that gives them a better chance of doing it than previous England sides.
And they make it fun on the way as well. Geoff?
It's definitely fun, and it's enjoyable. But I don't share Andy's optimism simply based on the fact that this England side, they've had some great test wins and then turned around and been belted in the rest of the series. They haven't won anything that actually matters that much. They've beaten teams at home who they should be beating at home. They haven't won. I mean, there was a series in Pakistan, but they haven't really won away in anything significant. And when they've had Australia and England visit England, they haven't been able to beat them at home either. So for all the talk about the revolution, it hasn't actually brought that much in the way of results. And I think they'll win a test. I don't think they'll win a series. I reckon they go down 3-1 and, yeah, it probably rains in Sydney because it usually does. The only caveat to that is if they do get on top of this Australian team and if they do start opening the cracks, I could see this Australian team falling apart pretty quickly. So so much depends on this first test, right? I wouldn't be surprised to see Australia crash, but I still don't think that they're going to lose the series. If they do, they'll lose it pretty dramatically.
Oh, well, it'll be good if that happens, I will say. So, partisan. That'll do for today. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Andy.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Ali.
Bye-bye, Max. Speak to you soon.
Cheers, Jeff.
I will see you next week.
Yeah, if you want to get in touch, the email address is ashes.weekly@theguardian.com. You can find us on YouTube. Follow Guardian Sport on Instagram and TikTok. Ashes Weekly is produced by Nick Harmon. Our executive producer is Daniel Simo. The theme tune is by Rudy Zigadlo. Back after the first test.